The fluorescent lights in the church basement hummed with that particular frequency that always made my temples ache. I shifted in the folding chair, the metal cold even through my cardigan, and stared at the blank sheet of paper before me. Wednesday evenings had become my sanctuary, a routine carved from 2 years of volunteering with Pastor Michael's prison correspondence program. 2 years of writing to strangers, offering words of hope and faith to men society had forgotten. My pen hovered over the page, the familiar ritual of beginning a new letter suddenly feeling weighted with something I couldn't name. Outside, November rain tapped against the narrow windows near the ceiling, each drop a metronome counting down the minutes until I could return to my tiny apartment and the stack of grading waiting on my coffee table. Teaching English at Jefferson High paid barely enough to cover rent. But nights like these, when I could write to someone who needed connection more than I needed sleep, made the exhaustion worthwhile. "Sophia, you're still working on Flynn's letter?" Pastor Michael appeared beside me, his weathered hands carrying a box of envelopes. His salt and pepper beard couldn't hide the concerned furrow of his brow. "You've been corresponding with him longer than anyone else in the program." I nodded, feeling heat creep into my cheeks. 2 years next month. He's different from the others, Pastor. His letters are thoughtful, full of questions about literature and philosophy. He asks about my students, remembers details from letters I wrote months ago. I paused, uncertain how to articulate the strange comfort I'd found in our exchange. He feels like a friend. Pastor Michael's expression softened, but worry lingered in his eyes. "Just remember, dear, these men are in prison for serious reasons. Flynn Valente is serving a lengthy sentence. Don't let the eloquence of his words make you forget the reality of his situation." The name rolled off his tongue with weight, but to me, Flynn was simply the thoughtful man whose cramped handwriting filled pages with observations about the books I'd recommended. The man who asked about my ailing mother before she passed, who sent a surprisingly touching condolence when she did. The man who challenged my perspectives on redemption and second chances with arguments that kept me awake at night, rereading his words by lamplight. I knew nothing of his crime, and I'd never asked. Pastor Michael maintained strict confidentiality about the inmates' backgrounds, believing their past shouldn't define the ministry's purpose. We were meant to offer spiritual support, human connection, proof that they hadn't been completely abandoned by the world. Nothing more. But Flynn had become more. His letters arrived with clockwork regularity, every 2 weeks like sunrise, and I'd started anticipating them with an eagerness that both thrilled and unsettled me. His most recent letter sat in my bag now, read so many times I'd memorized passages. "Sophia, you asked what I think about when I'm alone in my cell at night. I think about freedom, but not in the way you might imagine. I don't dream of open roads or endless horizons. I dream of simple things, the kind I took for granted before. Morning coffee that doesn't taste like rust. A real conversation, face to face, where I can see someone's expressions change with their thoughts. The weight of rain on my shoulders. And lately, if I'm honest, I dream of meeting the woman whose words have been my only window to a life worth living. Does that frighten you? It should, perhaps. But I've never been good at hiding truth. Not from you." The confession had lodged itself under my ribs, a splinter of something that felt dangerous. I'd read it a dozen times, searching for manipulation, for the calculated charm Pastor Michael had warned me about. But I found only raw honesty, vulnerability that felt too genuine to be performance. Now, staring at the blank page, I struggled to craft a response that wouldn't reveal how his words affected me, how they'd made my pulse quicken, and my carefully maintained boundaries suddenly feel permeable. "Dear Flynn," I began, my handwriting slightly shaky. "Your last letter arrived during a particularly difficult week. One of my students, Marcus, a boy who reminds me so much of the young men you must see around you, was arrested for attempted robbery. He's 16, Flynn. 16 years old with his whole life ahead of him, And now he's facing charges that could define his next decade. I keep thinking about what you wrote about second chances, about how we're all more than our worst moments. I paused, biting my lower lip. The basement was quiet, except for the rain and the distant sound of Pastor Michael shuffling papers in his office. 3 other volunteers had finished their letters and departed, leaving me alone with thoughts I shouldn't be having about a man I'd never met. You asked if your honesty frightens me. It doesn't. Not in the way you think. What frightens me is how much I look forward to your letters, how your words have become highlights in weeks that are otherwise mundane and repetitive. You've made me question things I thought were certain about myself, about faith, about redemption and forgiveness. My pen moved faster now, words flowing with a freedom I rarely allowed myself. You want to know what I dream about? I dream about a classroom full of students who actually care about learning, who see education as liberation rather than obligation. I dream about writing a book someday, though I'm not sure I have anything important enough to say. And lately, I admit, I've wondered what it would be like to meet you too, to see if the man in my imagination matches the one who writes these letters. I stopped, reading what I'd written with growing alarm. This was too much, too revealing. I should crumple this page and start over with something safer, more appropriate for the boundaries we were supposed to maintain. But I didn't. Instead, I kept writing. But I also dream about you having a real second chance, Flynn. About you leaving that place and starting over, building a life where you can have those simple freedoms you mentioned. Morning coffee that doesn't taste like rust, real conversations, rain on your shoulders. You deserve that. Everyone does. The church basement suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with the weight of confession. I signed my name with a flourish that betrayed the trembling in my hands, then sealed the envelope before I could reconsider. Pastor Michael emerged from his office as I was gathering my things, his eyes landing on the sealed letter with something that looked like resignation. Sophia, I need to tell you something about Flynn Valente. My stomach dropped. What about him? The pastor sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. He's being released. Early parole was granted last week. He'll be out by the end of the month. The room tilted slightly. Released. Flynn was getting out. The abstract man of letters and philosophical musings would become concrete, 3-dimensional, real. That's wonderful news, I managed, though my voice sounded hollow even to my ears. He must be thrilled. Sophia? Pastor Michael's tone grew grave. There are things about Flynn's case you should know. I've kept confidentiality because I believed it was right for the program. But now that he's getting out, I think you deserve to understand who you've been corresponding with. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. I don't want to know. Whatever he did, it's in the past. He's paid his debt to society. That's what the justice system is for, isn't it? Punishment and rehabilitation. The pastor looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression stopped him. Just be careful, dear. Not all men who leave prison leave their past behind. I nodded, clutching the letter to my chest as I hurried out into the November rain. The cold water soaked through my cardigan within seconds, but I barely felt it. My mind was racing, heart hammering against my ribs with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety I couldn't untangle. Flynn was getting out. The man whose words had become my secret comfort, whose thoughts had challenged and changed me in ways I was only beginning to understand, would soon be free. And somewhere, in the back of my mind, a voice whispered questions I wasn't ready to answer. What would happen when we met? Would he seek me out? Did I want him to? I drove home through streets blurred by rain and conflicting emotions. The sealed letter on my passenger seat a promise I couldn't take back. Inside it, my honest words about dreams and second chances, about wanting to meet him. I'd sent letters to a prisoner for 2 years, believing I was offering ministry and human kindness. But what I hadn't realized, what I couldn't have known, was that I wasn't writing to just any inmate. I was writing to Flynn Valente. And Flynn Valente wasn't just a man serving time. He was a man powerful enough that his absence had left a vacuum in the city's underworld, a vacuum that was about to be filled by his return. He was a man who had read my letters not as pastoral comfort, but as something infinitely more precious. And he was a man who had decided, somewhere in those 2 years of correspondence, that I was going to be his wife. I just didn't know it yet. The letter I'd just written, with its confessions and vulnerabilities, its admission that I'd wondered about meeting him, would reach him just as he was being processed for release. And it would confirm what he'd already decided, that Sophia Reeves, the sweet-voiced teacher who'd written to him about literature and second chances, belonged to him. That conviction would drive every decision he made in the coming weeks. But as I unlocked my apartment door that night, shaking off rain and hanging my wet cardigan to dry, I knew none of this. I only knew that my Wednesday evenings were about to change forever, and that the man whose letters I'd treasured was about to become terrifyingly, thrillingly real. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after I'd sent that letter. I was in the middle of explaining symbolism in The Great Gatsby to my second period class when my phone vibrated in my desk drawer. I ignored it, as I always did during class, but it vibrated again, and again. By the fourth time, concern overrode protocol. "Continue reading Chapter 7, I told my students, stepping into the hallway with my phone clutched tight. The number was unfamiliar. Local area code. "Hello. Sophia Reeves?" The voice was male, smooth, professional. Not Flynn's voice, I realized, with a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. I'd never heard Flynn's voice, but I'd imagined it countless times, usually deep and rough from disuse. "Yes, this is she. Who's calling?" "My name is Marcus Chen. I'm an attorney, and I'm calling on behalf of Flynn Valente. He asked me to reach out to you." My heart stopped, then started again at double speed. "Flynn is out?" "As of yesterday morning, yes. He's completed his sentence and has been fully released." A pause, weighted with something I couldn't identify. "Ms. Reeves, Flynn would very much like to meet you in person. He wanted me to extend an invitation for dinner this evening, if you're available." This evening, so soon. I pressed my free hand against the cool tile wall, steadying myself. I don't know if that's appropriate. Our correspondence was part of a ministry program. I'm not sure meeting outside that context is— "Ms. Reeves," the attorney interrupted gently. "Flynn has been very clear about his intentions. He values the connection you've built through your letters. He simply wants to thank you properly for the kindness you've shown him over the past 2 years. Surely dinner is a reasonable request." The phrasing struck me as odd. His intentions. What intentions? But my curiosity, that dangerous thing that had been growing with every letter, won out over caution. "Where would we meet?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Luciano's, in the waterfront district. 7 o'clock. A private table has been reserved under his name." Luciano's. I knew the restaurant by reputation only, the kind of establishment where entrees cost more than my weekly grocery budget. That's very generous, but perhaps somewhere more casual would be. 7 o'clock, Ms. Reeves. Flynn is looking forward to finally meeting you." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood in the empty hallway, my reflection staring back at me from the glass door of a display case showcasing student art projects. I looked pale, uncertain, my dark hair escaping from its sensible bun. What was I doing? Meeting a man I'd only known through letters, a man who'd spent 2 years in prison for crimes I'd deliberately remained ignorant about. Pastor Michael's warning echoed in my memory. Not all men who leave prison leave their past behind. But Flynn's letters, those thoughtful, vulnerable, Honest letters. They couldn't have been lies. Could they? I returned to my classroom in a daze, somehow making it through the rest of the day on autopilot. My students noticed my distraction, exchanging knowing looks that suggested they thought I had a date. They weren't wrong, exactly, but they couldn't have imagined the truth. After the final bell, I sat in my empty classroom, staring at my phone. I should call Pastor Michael, ask his advice. I should cancel, send a polite message through the attorney explaining that our correspondence had been professional, nothing more. Instead, I found myself driving home to change clothes. My apartment felt smaller than usual as I rifled through my closet, searching for something appropriate for dinner at Luciano's. Most of my wardrobe consisted of teacher-appropriate separates, cardigans, and practical slacks, nothing remotely suitable for an upscale restaurant. Finally, I settled on a simple navy dress I'd bought for my mother's funeral and rarely worn since. It was modest, but elegant, the kind of dress that wouldn't embarrass me in a nice establishment. I pinned my hair up more carefully than usual, applied light makeup with trembling hands. As I studied my reflection, I barely recognized myself. My eyes looked wider, brighter, my cheeks flushed with nervousness and something else. Anticipation, perhaps, or fear. They felt increasingly similar. The drive to the waterfront district took 40 minutes in rush hour traffic, giving me plenty of time to reconsider. I could turn around right now, go home, send an apologetic email explaining that I couldn't make it. Flynn would understand. Wouldn't he? But I didn't turn around. Some magnetic pull I couldn't name drew me forward, through traffic and second thoughts, until I was pulling into the parking lot of Luciano's precisely at 7 o'clock. The restaurant was everything I'd imagined and more. Warm, amber lighting spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating white tablecloths and crystal stemware. A valet approached my modest sedan with professional courtesy that suggested he'd seen far worse, and I handed over my keys with shaking fingers. Inside, the maitre d' somehow knew exactly who I was before I'd spoken a word. "Ms. Reeves, welcome. Mr. Valenti is waiting for you in our private dining room." He gestured toward a hallway leading away from the main restaurant, deeper into the building. "Private dining room?" I echoed, uncertainty creeping back. The maitre d's smile was practiced, revealing nothing. "This way, please." I followed him down a corridor lined with black and white photographs of old Italy, my heels clicking against marble floors. At the end of the hall stood a heavy wooden door. The maitre d' opened it with a flourish, then stepped aside. The room beyond was intimate, elegant. A single table set for two, candles flickering, a bottle of wine already breathing. And standing by the window, looking out at the darkening harbor, stood a man. He turned as I entered, and the breath left my body. Flynn Valenti was nothing like I'd imagined. Taller, broader through the shoulders, his presence filling the room in a way that made the space feel suddenly smaller. Dark hair, longer than fashion dictated, swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and intensity. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, tailored to perfection. But it was his eyes that held me frozen in the doorway. Dark, penetrating, they studied me with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. There was recognition in those eyes, familiarity, as if he'd been seeing me for far longer than these few seconds. "Sophia." My name in his voice, that voice I'd imagined so many times, sent a shiver down my spine. It was deeper than I'd thought, rougher, with an edge that suggested danger barely contained. "You're even more beautiful than I imagined." I stood there, unable to move, unable to speak. This was Flynn, the man whose words had been my Wednesday evening ritual, whose thoughts had become intertwined with my own, but he was also something else, something the letters hadn't prepared me for. He was powerful, commanding. And the way he looked at me, It wasn't the gaze of a man meeting a pen pal for the first time. It was the gaze of a man looking at something that already belonged to him. My voice came out smaller than I intended. I wasn't sure what to expect. A smile curved his lips, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Neither was I, honestly. 2 years of letters, and I still wasn't prepared for this moment. He moved toward me, each step measured, deliberate. Thank you for coming. I know it took courage. He pulled out a chair for me, the gesture courtly, old-fashioned. I sat because my legs were threatening to give out, and watched as he took the seat across from me. Up close, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. Evidence of the years he'd spent locked away. I hope the restaurant is to your liking, he said, pouring wine into my glass with steady hands. I wanted our first meeting to be memorable. It's beautiful, I managed. But Flynn, this is too much. You just got out yesterday. You don't need to. I wanted to, he interrupted, his eyes never leaving mine. Sophia, do you have any idea what your letters meant to me? What they still mean? The intensity in his voice made my throat tight. I was just doing what the program asked, offering support, companionship. No. The word was soft, but firm. You gave me far more than that. You gave me hope, purpose, a reason to become better than what I was. He leaned forward slightly, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine. You saved me, Sophia. In every way a person can be saved. I don't understand, I whispered. It was just letters, conversations about books and philosophy. Was it? His smile was knowing, almost sad. Reading your last letter, the one about dreams and second chances, about wondering what it would be like to meet me, I realized something. You feel it too, don't you? This connection between us. My hands twisted in my lap beneath the table. Flynn, I think maybe there's been some misunderstanding. Our correspondence was meant to be... I know what it was meant to be, he said quietly. And I know what it became. At least for me. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine before I could pull away. His touch was warm, solid, achingly real after 2 years of imagining. I'm not going to pretend, Sophia. I'm not going to play games or hide my intentions. From the moment I read your first letter, something in me recognized you. And with each letter after that, the certainty grew stronger. Certainty about what? I asked, though part of me already knew, had known since the attorney's call that morning. That you're meant to be mine. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I should have laughed, should have pulled my hand away and left immediately. This was madness. You didn't fall in love through letters. You didn't claim someone as yours after never meeting them. But the intensity in his eyes, the conviction in his voice, made it impossible to dismiss as delusion. Flynn, that's not... We can't just... I struggled for words that would make sense of the chaos in my chest. You don't even know me. Not really. I know you better than anyone, he countered. I know you bite your lower lip when you're thinking about something difficult. I know you read late into the night when you can't sleep, usually poetry. I know you cry during sad movies but try to hide it. I know you believe in redemption even when it costs you, that you see potential in people others have given up on. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. I know your favorite color is sage green, that you take your coffee with too much cream, that you dream of writing a book someday but don't think you're good enough. Each detail he recited was correct, things I'd mentioned in passing across dozens of letters. He'd been paying attention, remembering, building an image of me that was startlingly accurate. That doesn't mean you know the real me, I protested weakly. People are different in person than in letters. Then let me get to know the real you. His voice dropped lower, intimate. Give me a chance to prove I'm not just words on paper either. Let me court you properly, Sophia. Let me show you what we could be together. Court me. The old-fashioned phrase should have been charming, but something about the way he said it made it sound less like a request, and more like an inevitability he was simply giving me time to accept. I don't think that's a good idea, I said, finally finding the strength to pull my hand from his. Flynn, you just got out of prison yesterday. You need time to adjust, to figure out your life. You don't need the complication of pursuing someone you barely know. Something hardened in his expression, a flash of steel beneath the charm. You think I don't know what I want? I've had 2 years to think about nothing else. 2 years of planning for this moment, for the life I'm going to build now that I'm free. He leaned back, studying me. But I can see I'm overwhelming you. That wasn't my intention. A waiter appeared as if summoned, placing elaborate dishes before us. The food looked exquisite, but my appetite had vanished. Tell me about your students, Flynn said, his tone shifting to something lighter, easier. Your last letter mentioned Marcus, the boy who got arrested. How is he doing? The change in subject was a relief, and I found myself relaxing slightly as I told him about Marcus's situation, about my efforts to get him a good lawyer, about the fears I had for his future. Flynn listened with the same focused attention I'd felt in his letters, asking thoughtful questions, offering surprisingly insightful observations. As the meal progressed, I began to see glimpses of the man from the letters, the thoughtful philosopher, the voracious reader, the person who could discuss everything from classical literature to modern social justice with equal passion. It would have been easy to let my guard down completely. But I didn't miss the way the staff treated him, the deference that went beyond mere customer service, the way the maitre d' had bowed slightly when we'd arrived, the way the waiter never quite met Flynn's eyes. These people weren't treating him like a recently released ex-convict trying to reintegrate into society. They were treating him like royalty, or something equally powerful. Flynn, I said carefully, setting down my fork. What did you do? Before prison, I mean. What was your life like? His expression shuddered slightly. Does it matter? I think it might. He was quiet for a long moment, swirling wine in his glass. I was in business. Import-export. Primarily. Family business. Inherited from my father. And why were you in prison? Sophia. I never asked before because I thought it didn't matter. But if you're serious about whatever this is you're proposing, I deserve to know the truth. He met my eyes, and what I saw there made my breath catch. Not shame, not exactly, but a kind of cold acknowledgement of reality. I was convicted of racketeering and conspiracy. I served the minimum of my sentence, got out early for good behavior and overcrowding. His voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. The charges were politically motivated, but the life I led before prison wasn't exactly innocent either. My heart sank. What does that mean? It means I come from a world you've only read about in books, Sophia. A world where power matters more than the law, where loyalty is currency and weakness gets you killed. He leaned forward. But that's the life I'm leaving behind. For you. For me? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Flynn, you barely know me. How can I possibly be worth abandoning your entire world? Because you already changed me, he said simply. Your letters, your faith in redemption, your belief that people can be better than their worst moments. It got under my skin. Made me question things I'd never questioned before. His hand reached across the table again, and this time I didn't pull away. I want to be the man you think I am, the man you've been writing to, but I need you to give me that chance. I looked down at our joined hands, at the contrast between his larger, scarred knuckles and my smaller, softer fingers. This was insane. Everything about this situation screamed warning, from Pastor Michael's concerned words to Flynn's vague admissions about his past. But there was also something intoxicating about his intensity, his absolute certainty. No one had ever looked at me the way Flynn was looking at me now, like I was precious beyond measure, essential to his very existence. "I need time," I said finally, "to think about this, about what you're asking." "Of course." He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that sent electricity up my arm. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." But as he released my hand and signaled for the check, as we made our way out of the restaurant into the cool November evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd already made my decision. That the moment I'd walked into that private dining room and met his eyes, something had shifted irreversibly. Flynn walked me to my car, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. The touch was possessive, claiming, but also somehow protective. When we reached my sedan, he opened the door for me, but before I could slip inside, he caught my chin, tilting my face up to his. "One more thing, Sophia." His thumb traced along my jaw, his eyes dark in the parking lot lights. "I meant what I said about courting you properly, but I also need you to understand something." He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "I've never wanted anything as much as I want you, and I always get what I want, eventually." The words should have frightened me. They were a threat dressed up as a promise, a declaration of intent that left no room for my own choice. But instead, they made my pulse race and my knees weak. "Good night, Flynn," I whispered, not trusting my voice. "Good night, sweetheart. I'll call you tomorrow." I drove home in a daze, my mind replaying every moment of the evening. The way he'd looked at me, the way he'd touched me, the absolute conviction in his voice when he'd declared his intentions. It wasn't until I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, that I allowed myself to acknowledge the terrifying truth. I wanted him to pursue me, wanted to believe in the possibility of the life he was offering, dangerous and complicated as it might be. Because in Flynn's eyes, I'd seen something I'd never seen in anyone else's. I'd seen myself reflected back as someone worth changing the world for. And God help me, I wanted to believe it was true. The flowers arrived the next morning during my planning period. 3 dozen white roses, pristine and perfect, delivered to my classroom by a courier who looked distinctly uncomfortable, surrounded by curious teenagers. The card was simple, written in Flynn's distinctive handwriting that I recognized from 2 years of letters. For the woman who showed me what beauty looks like through words. Now, let me show you what it means in action. Yours, Flynn. Ms. Reeves has a boyfriend, one of my students sing-songed, and the classroom erupted in teasing laughter. I felt my cheeks burn as I carried the massive arrangement to my desk, trying to ignore the knowing looks from my more perceptive students. But the roses were only the beginning. Over the next week, Flynn's courtship unfolded with the precision of a military campaign. Lunch delivered daily to the teacher's lounge, each meal from a different upscale restaurant, each accompanied by a note. Books I'd mentioned wanting to read appeared on my doorstep. A donation was made to Jefferson High's struggling arts program, funding it for the entire year. And through it all, the phone calls. Every evening at 8 o'clock, like clockwork, my phone would ring. Flynn's voice, that rough velvet sound, asking about my day, my students, my thoughts on whatever book we were both currently reading. The conversations stretched for hours, easily, naturally, as if we'd known each other for years instead of weeks. "You're different lately," my colleague Sarah commented one Friday afternoon as we graded papers in my classroom. She'd been teaching at Jefferson for 15 years, long enough to notice when someone's entire demeanor had shifted. lighter somehow. Is there a man? I couldn't help the smile that curved my lips. Maybe. Maybe? Sarah laughed. Honey, those roses on your desk and that dreamy look on your face say definitely. Who is he? Someone from church? Sort of. It's complicated. I set down my red pen, debating how much to share. We've been corresponding for a while, but we only just met in person recently. Online dating, Sarah guessed. My sister met her husband that way. Nothing to be ashamed of. Not exactly. I hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. He was incarcerated. I was writing to him through Pastor Michael's prison ministry program. Sarah's expression cycled through shock, concern, and finally settled on wary curiosity. Sophia, are you sure that's wise? I mean, I'm all for second chances, but... He served his time, I said, more defensively than I intended. He's out now, and he's trying to build a legitimate life. Doesn't everyone deserve that opportunity? Of course they do, Sarah said carefully. I'm just worried about you. Prison changes people, not always for the better. What was he in for? I don't. I'm not sure I should say. The truth was, I'd been deliberately avoiding asking Flynn for more details about his conviction. The vague explanation he'd given at dinner, racketeering and conspiracy, felt like looking at an iceberg and only seeing the tip. Sarah studied me with the kind of concern I'd seen her show struggling students. Just be careful, okay? Protective instincts are good, but don't let them blind you to red flags. Her warning echoed in my mind later that evening, when Flynn called at his usual time. I want to see you this weekend, he said after we'd exhausted our usual topics. Really see you, not just dinner in a restaurant. Let me take you somewhere. Where? I asked, curling up on my couch with a mug of tea. It's a surprise, but dress comfortably. I'll pick you up Saturday at 10. Saturday morning arrived gray and threatening rain, but my nerves had nothing to do with the weather. I'd agonized over what to wear, finally settling on jeans, a soft sweater, and boots that could handle walking. When Flynn's car pulled up outside my apartment building at precisely 10, I was waiting by the window like a teenager on her first date. The vehicle that stopped at the curb wasn't what I expected. Not a flashy sports car or luxury sedan, but a sleek black SUV with tinted windows. Flynn emerged from the driver's side, and my breath caught as it did every time I saw him. Today he wore jeans and a black leather jacket over a simple gray shirt, his hair slightly mussed by the wind. He looked younger somehow, more approachable than the intimidating figure from our dinner. Ready for an adventure? He asked when I opened my apartment door, his smile genuine and boyish. Depends on the adventure, I replied, grabbing my jacket. You're being very mysterious. I want to show you something important to me. A place I've been thinking about during my entire sentence, planning to return to when I got out. He helped me into the passenger seat with that old-fashioned courtesy I was learning was characteristic. Trust me? The question felt loaded with more meaning than a simple day trip warranted. But I nodded, and we pulled away from my building into the overcast morning. We drove north out of the city, Flynn's hand occasionally leaving the steering wheel to rest on my knee, casual and possessive. We talked about everything and nothing, our conversation flowing as easily as it did on the phone. He told me about his first week of freedom, the strangeness of grocery shopping and making his own decisions after years of regimentation. It's overwhelming sometimes, he admitted, his eyes on the road, having so many choices. I found myself standing in the cereal aisle for 20 minutes yesterday, just staring at all the options. What did you end up choosing? I asked, charmed by his vulnerability. I didn't. I left without buying any. He laughed, a sound I was learning to treasure. Ridiculous, right? A grown man paralyzed by breakfast choices. Not ridiculous, I said softly. Human. His hand squeezed my knee gently. That's what you do, you know. make me feel human again, not like the thing I became inside. An hour later, we pulled off the highway onto a narrow road that wound through increasingly rural landscape. Bare trees lined the way, their branches skeletal against the gray sky. Finally, we turned onto a long gravel driveway that led to a small farmhouse. White clapboard siding, weathered but sturdy, with a wraparound porch and fields stretching behind it. "This is my family's land," Flynn said as we parked. 300 acres. Been in the Valente family for 4 generations. My grandmother lived here until she passed while I was inside. His voice grew quieter. I never got to say goodbye to her. I reached for his hand, threading my fingers through his. "I'm sorry." He turned to me, his eyes intense. "I've been thinking about this place constantly, Sophia. About what it could be. What it represents." "What does it represent?" I asked. "A fresh start. A life away from the city, away from the business, away from everything that led me to prison." He gestured toward the house. "I could restore it. The land is fertile, good for farming. Maybe livestock. A simple life, honest work." "That sounds beautiful," I said, meaning it. "Come inside. I want you to see something." The house was cold, long unheated, but structurally sound. Flynn led me through rooms that smelled of dust and memories, pointing out original hardwood floors, hand-carved banisters, a stone fireplace in the living room. His enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself imagining the space restored, warm with life. Upstairs, he showed me 4 bedrooms. "Master suite," he said, opening one door to reveal a large room with windows overlooking the back fields. Then another door. "This could be a nursery someday, and these 2 could be children's rooms as they grow." The casual mention of children, of a future so concrete and planned, should have sent me running. We'd known each other in person for barely 2 weeks, but instead, I felt something flutter in my chest, hope mixing dangerously with possibility. "Flynn," I said carefully, "this is a lot. You're talking about a whole life here." "I am." He turned to face me fully, taking both my hands in his. "Because that's what I want, Sophia. A life, a real one, with you, marriage, children, growing old together on this land." His thumbs traced circles on my wrists. "I know it's fast. I know I'm overwhelming you. But I also know what I want, and I've learned not to waste time pretending otherwise." "But we barely know each other," I protested weakly. "We've known each other for 2 years, he countered. "Our souls have been touching through those letters long before our hands ever did. The rest is just logistics." He drew me closer, his forehead resting against mine. "I'm not asking you to decide everything right now. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility, to let yourself imagine a life with me." "I can't ask you to give up your whole world for me," I whispered. "Your business, your family connections, everything you've built." "My world, as you call it, almost destroyed me," he interrupted, his voice hard. "The business, the lifestyle, the constant looking over my shoulder, it's all poison. I want out, Sophia. I've wanted out for years, but never had a good enough reason." His hands cupped my face, tilting it up to meet his eyes. "Until you." The intensity of his gaze made my knees weak. "What if I'm not enough? What if you give all this up and then realize you made a mistake? That's not going to happen." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "But if you need more time to believe that, I'll give it to you. I'm patient, sweetheart. I waited 2 years for the possibility of touching you. I can wait a little longer for you to accept what we both know is inevitable." Before I could respond, he kissed me. It wasn't the tentative first kiss of new lovers, but something deeper, more claiming. His lips were firm against mine, demanding response, and I gave it without thought, my hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer as 2 years of imagining and hoping crystallized into this single moment of contact. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Flynn rested his forehead against mine again. "Tell me you feel this," he murmured. "Tell me I'm not alone in this madness." "I feel it," I admitted, the words both liberation and surrender. "God help me. I feel it." He smiled, brilliant and triumphant, and kissed me again. Softer this time. Sweeter. Full of promise. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking the property. Flynn pointing out where he envisioned a garden, a small orchard, maybe a few horses. His vision was so clear, so detailed, that I could see it too. Could imagine mornings picking vegetables, afternoons reading on that wraparound porch, evenings cooking dinner in a restored farmhouse kitchen. "I want to introduce you to my family," Flynn said as we drove back toward the city as dusk was falling. "Properly, I mean. My sister Gianna has been asking about you since I mentioned you." "You told your family about me?" I asked, surprised. "Of course. You're important to me, which makes you important to them." He glanced over, his expression softening. "They'll love you, Sophia. How could they not?" Meeting his family felt like another step toward something irreversible, but I found myself nodding. "Okay. When?" "Dinner next Sunday? Nothing formal, just family." His hand found mine again, that now familiar gesture of connection. "Fair warning, though. Valentines are loud, opinionated, and will probably embarrass me with childhood stories." I laughed. "I look forward to it." But as we pulled up outside my apartment building, reality intruded on the bubble we'd built during our day together. A familiar car was parked outside, Pastor Michael's elderly sedan with the fish decal on the bumper. Flynn noticed my tension immediately. "What's wrong?" "That's Pastor Michael's car. He's probably here to check on me." I bit my lip. "He's been worried about us. About you." Something hardened in Flynn's expression. "Has he now?" "Flynn, he doesn't know you. He just wants to make sure I'm safe." I squeezed his hand. "Let me talk to him alone, please." He clearly didn't like it, but nodded. "Call me after. I want to know you're okay." "I will. I promise." I kissed him quickly, then climbed out of the SUV. Pastor Michael was waiting in the building's small lobby, his kind face creased with concern. "Sophia, I've been trying to reach you all day. I'm sorry, Pastor. My phone's been off. I was out." I gestured toward the door, where Flynn's SUV was still idling at the curb. "With Flynn." I gathered as much. He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Sophia, we need to talk. About Flynn Valente and who he really is." My defenses rose immediately. "I know he was in prison. I know he's trying to build a new life. Isn't that what the ministry is about? Redemption. Redemption requires repentance," Pastor Michael said gently. "Sophia, Flynn Valente wasn't just some petty criminal who made a mistake. He's the head of one of the largest organized crime families in the state. Racketeering was just what they could prove in court. The reality of his empire, it's built on violence and corruption." The words landed like physical blows. "No, you're wrong. Flynn isn't like that. He's thoughtful, kind. He wants to leave that life behind." "He's told you what you want to hear." The pastor interrupted. "Sophia, I've seen this pattern before. These men, they're charismatic, persuasive. They know how to make vulnerable women feel special, chosen. I'm not some naive girl being manipulated," I snapped, anger flaring. "I'm an adult capable of making my own decisions. I'm not saying you're naive. I'm saying you're in danger." Pastor Michael's voice grew urgent. "Men like Flynn Valente don't leave their world behind, no matter what promises they make. The families, the power structures, they don't just let people walk away. and anyone close to him becomes a target. He showed me his grandmother's farmhouse today, I said, needing him to understand. Told me about the life he wants to build there. Away from the city, away from the business. He's serious about changing, Pastor. And you believe him? Yes, I said firmly. I believe him. Pastor Michael looked at me with such sadness that it made my throat tight. Then I can't protect you from what's coming. But know this, Sophia. My door is always open. When you need help, and I pray you won't, but when you do, come to me. He left without another word, passing Flynn's SUV on his way to his own car. I saw them exchange a long look through the tinted windows, two men who understood something about each other that I couldn't quite grasp. When I called Flynn later that night, his first question was, "What did the good pastor have to say?" "He's concerned about me, about us." I paused. "He told me things about your past, about who you were before prison." "And do you believe him?" I thought about the farmhouse, about Flynn's vision for a different life, about the way he looked at me like I was his salvation. "I believe you want to change," I said finally, "and I believe I want to help you do it." His exhale was audible, relief evident. "Thank you for having faith in me. But Flynn, if we're going to do this, if we're going to try to build something real, I need you to be honest with me about everything." "What do you want to know?" "Everything. The truth about what your life was like before, what you did, who you were." There was a long silence. Then, "Okay, but not over the phone. Come to my apartment tomorrow. I'll tell you everything, answer any question you have. And after that, you can decide if you still want to be with me." The offer terrified me, but I agreed. Because if I was going to give Flynn Valente my heart, I needed to know exactly what I was getting into, even if the truth might break us before we really began. Flynn's apartment was in the penthouse of a building I'd passed 100 times, but never imagined entering. The doorman greeted him by name. The elevator required a special key for the top floor, and when the doors opened directly into his living space, I felt like I'd stepped into another world. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, the Sunday afternoon sun casting everything in golden light. The furnishings were minimalist, but clearly expensive, all clean lines and neutral tones. Artwork that looked like it belonged in galleries adorned the walls. This wasn't the home of someone trying to start over. This was the domain of someone with significant wealth and power. "I know what you're thinking," Flynn said, reading my expression as he helped me out of my jacket. "This doesn't look like a reformed man's modest new beginning." "It doesn't," I agreed, moving to the windows. From this height, the city looked like a toy model, manageable and contained. "How can you afford this if you've left your old life behind?" "Because I haven't left it behind yet. Not entirely." He joined me at the window, his reflection overlaying the cityscape. "That's what I need to explain to you. What I need you to understand before you decide if you can really be with me." He guided me to a leather sofa, poured us both wine that probably cost more than my car payment, and sat close enough that our knees touched. Then he began to talk. "The Valente family has been in New York for 5 generations, he started. "We came from Sicily, like a lot of Italian families, and we brought the old ways with us. Protection, enforcement, respect. My great-grandfather built an empire through sheer force of will and strategic violence. Each generation expanded it, modernized it, made it more sophisticated." I listened without interrupting, watching his face as he spoke. There was no pride in his voice, just a kind of resigned acceptance. By the time my father passed it to me, we controlled most of the ports, half the construction contracts in the city, several unions, and had legitimate business investments that made us millions annually. On paper, we looked like successful entrepreneurs. In reality, we were exactly what people think we are. Organized crime. What did you actually do? I asked quietly. Day to day, what did being the head of this family mean? He met my eyes directly. It meant making decisions about who could operate in our territory, collecting debts, sometimes through persuasion, sometimes through force, ensuring loyalty through rewards and punishment, mediating disputes between families to prevent wars, and yes, occasionally, ordering actions that resulted in violence. The casual admission of violence should have sent me running, but I forced myself to stay, to hear the whole truth. I never killed anyone myself, he continued, anticipating my question. But I gave orders that resulted in deaths. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, Sophia. I won't insult you with justifications or excuses. I did what I did because that was the world I was born into, and I believed it was the only world that made sense. What changed? I asked. A bitter smile crossed his face. Prison changed me. Or more accurately, 2 years of reading your letters changed me. Every Wednesday, like clockwork, you'd write to me about hope, redemption, second chances. You believed in rehabilitation, in the possibility that people could become better than their worst selves. He took my hand, his thumb tracing my knuckles. At first, I thought it was naive. Sweet, but ultimately meaningless in the real world. But your words got under my skin, made me start questioning everything I'd accepted as inevitable. Made me realize that the life I'd been leading, the power I'd accumulated, none of it made me happy. It just made me isolated and paranoid. So you decided to leave? I prompted. I decided I wanted to try. But it's not simple, Sophia. You don't just walk away from this life. There are people who depend on me, business relationships that go back generations, family members whose livelihoods are tied to the organization. I can't just abandon them. Then what are you saying? Confusion and frustration warred in my chest. That you're staying in organized crime? That everything you told me about the farmhouse, about a different life, was fantasy? No. He shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cup my face. I'm saying I'm working on an exit strategy, transitioning leadership to my cousin Marco, liquidating the illegal operations, distancing myself gradually. But it takes time, and it's dangerous. People who try to leave too quickly or too completely end up dead. The bluntness of his words sent a chill through me. Are you in danger right now? Always, he said simply. That's part of why I need you to understand what you're getting into. Being with me means accepting a certain level of risk. It means having security around you, being careful about where you go and who you talk to. It means patience while I disentangle myself from obligations that go back decades. I pulled back from his touch, needing space to think. Flynn, this is so much more complicated than I imagined. I thought you were just a man trying to start over, not someone still embedded in a criminal empire. I know. And if it's too much, if you can't handle the reality versus the fantasy, I understand. His voice was steady, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Fear that I would walk away, that he would lose me before we'd really begun. But I need you to know, everything I said about wanting you, about building a life together, that's real. You're the only thing that makes sense in my world anymore, Sophia. You're what's worth fighting for. I stood, moving back to the windows, my reflection a ghost against the city below. What happens if I say yes? If I agree to try despite all of this? He came to stand behind me, close but not touching. Then we move forward, together. I continue working toward getting out while you continue being exactly who you are, teaching your students, living your life. We date properly, get to know each other in person the way we did through letters. And when it's safe, when I've successfully transitioned out, We build that life on the farmhouse land. And if something goes wrong, if you can't get out? His reflection met mine in the glass. Then I make sure you're protected and provided for regardless. I've already made arrangements. If anything happens to me, you'll be taken care of financially. My sister Gianna knows to look after you. I don't want your money, I said sharply. I want you, alive and free and actually able to build that life you keep describing. Then help me get there. He finally touched me, his hands on my shoulders, turning me to face him. Be my reason for doing this right. Be my conscience when I'm tempted to take shortcuts. Be my future when the past tries to drag me back. I looked up into his face, at the intensity burning in his dark eyes, and felt the last of my resistance crumbling. This was madness. Everything about this situation screamed danger, warned me to run before I got in too deep. But I was already in too deep. Had been since the first letter I'd written to an inmate named Flynn Valente, not knowing that he would become the axis around which my entire world would turn. I must be crazy, I whispered. Is that a yes? Hope flickered across his features. It's a, let's try, with the understanding that if this gets too dangerous, if I feel like I'm compromising my values or putting others at risk, I'm walking away. Fair enough. He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me with a possessiveness that should have alarmed me, but instead felt like safety. I can work with that. We stood there for a long moment, the city spreading below us. Two people from completely different worlds trying to build a bridge between them. Tell me about your family, I said finally. The ones I'm meeting next Sunday. Flynn smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing. My sister Gianna is going to love you. She teaches elementary school, actually. Very much a civilian, though she knows about the family business. My brother Luca, he's deeper in the operations, but a good man despite it. And various aunts, uncles, cousins, all of whom will be intensely curious about the woman who's captured my attention. No pressure, I muttered, and he laughed. They'll adore you, I promise. Though fair warning, my Aunt Rosa will probably try to feed you until you burst, and my Uncle Tony will want to know your entire family history within the first 5 minutes. The casual family normalcy juxtaposed against the criminal enterprise we'd just been discussing created a cognitive dissonance that made my head spin. But this was my reality now, if I chose to embrace it. Normal people with normal relationships, built on the foundation of something deeply abnormal. Stay for dinner, Flynn said. Let me cook for you. Something simple, no restaurant staff or formality, just us. I agreed, and watched as he moved around the kitchen with surprising competence, preparing pasta carbonara while telling me stories about his grandmother, the one who'd lived in the farmhouse. She'd been a force of nature, apparently, ruling the family with an iron will disguised as maternal affection. She never approved of the business, Flynn said, grating cheese. Used to lecture my father and grandfather about bringing shame to the family name. But she loved us fiercely anyway, tried to keep us connected to the legitimate side of our heritage. She sounds wonderful. She was. I wish you could have met her. He glanced at me. She would have loved you. Would have said you were exactly what I needed to keep me human. We ate dinner at his dining table, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell. The conversation flowed easily, comfortably, touching on everything from our favorite books to our dreams for the future. It felt surreal, how normal this was, how right it felt despite everything I'd learned. After dinner, we settled on the sofa with coffee, and Flynn opened a box I'd noticed on the coffee table earlier. These are all your letters, he said, pulling out neat stacks of envelopes organized by date. I kept every single one, read them hundreds of times each. I picked up one at random, recognizing my handwriting, the careful way I'd addressed each envelope to him at the prison. I kept yours too, I admitted, in a shoebox under my bed. Really? His smile was boyish, pleased. "Did you read them over and over like I did yours?" "Maybe," I said, blushing. He kissed me then, slow and thorough, tasting of coffee and promise. When we finally broke apart, both breathing harder, he rested his forehead against mine. "Stay tonight," he murmured. I'm not asking for that. Just stay. Let me hold you while we sleep. Let me wake up with you in my arms for the first time." The request was intimate in ways that went beyond physical. It spoke of trust, of commitment, of stepping firmly into whatever this was between us. "Okay," I whispered. He led me to his bedroom, gave me one of his shirts to sleep in. The fabric smelled like him, clean and masculine, and I found myself breathing it in as I climbed into his bed. He joined me moments later, pulling me against him so my back fit against his chest, his arm heavy and warm around my waist. "Thank you," he said into my hair, "for giving us a chance, for having faith in me." "Thank you for being honest," I replied, "for not hiding who you are or what you've done." We fell asleep like that, tangled together as if we'd been sleeping beside each other for years instead of hours. And for the first time since my mother died, I felt completely safe. But safety, I would learn, was an illusion when you loved a man like Flynn Valente. An illusion that would shatter in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The days following my night at Flynn's apartment fell into a pattern that felt both thrilling and terrifying in its intensity. He was attentive in ways I'd never experienced, calling every morning before school, texting throughout the day, appearing at my apartment most evenings with dinner or plans for outings. He was courting me with single-minded focus, and I found myself falling deeper, despite my best efforts at caution. My students noticed the change in me. Sarah cornered me again in the teacher's lounge, demanding details about the mystery man who had me floating through my days with a dreamy expression. "He's good to you?" she asked, studying my face carefully. "Better than anyone has ever been," I admitted. But nothing," I lied. Because how could I explain the complexity that, yes, Flynn was everything I'd ever wanted, attentive and thoughtful and absolutely devoted, but also that he was still connected to a world that operated by rules I couldn't comprehend, where violence was currency and loyalty meant life or death. Sunday arrived too quickly. I changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple dress that was nice without being too formal. Flynn picked me up at noon, looking devastatingly handsome in dark slacks and a burgundy sweater that made his dark eyes even more intense. "Nervous?" he asked as we drove. "Terrified," I admitted. He reached over, squeezing my knee. "Don't be. They're going to love you." His sister's house was in a nice suburban neighborhood, the kind with tree-lined streets and children's bicycles and driveways. Nothing about it suggested connection to organized crime, and I felt some of my tension ease. Until we walked inside, and I was immediately engulfed by at least 15 people, all talking at once, all clearly related to Flynn with their dark eyes and expressive hands. "Everyone, please." Flynn raised his voice over the chaos. "This is Sophia." The room fell silent, every eye turning to assess me. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. Then a beautiful woman with Flynn's cheekbones but softer features stepped forward. "Sophia, I'm Gianna. Thank God you're real. We were starting to think Flynn had invented you." She pulled me into a warm hug. "Come, let me introduce you properly before this crowd devours you." The afternoon passed in a blur of names and faces, food and conversation. Flynn's Aunt Rosa did indeed try to feed me until I burst, piling my plate with enough food for 3 people. Uncle Tony peppered me with questions about my family history, my education, my intentions toward his nephew. But mostly, they were warm and welcoming, clearly thrilled that Flynn had found someone. Gianna pulled me aside at one point, her expression serious. "He's different with you," she said quietly. "Lighter somehow, less burdened. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. He needs someone like you." "Someone like me?" I echoed. "Someone good. Someone who sees him as a person. Not as the family heir or the boss or whatever role he's had to play." She squeezed my hand. "He talks about you constantly. About the farmhouse. About the future he wants to build. You've given him hope, Sophia. That's precious." Later, as we were saying our goodbyes, Flynn's Uncle Sal, an older man with shrewd eyes, cornered me by the door. "You love him?" he asked bluntly. The question caught me off guard. Did I love Flynn? We'd known each other in person for barely 3 weeks, but I thought about the letters, the phone calls, the way my heart raced when I saw him, the way I felt safe in his arms despite knowing the danger he represented. "Yes," I heard myself say. "I think I do." Uncle Sal nodded, satisfied. "Good. He needs someone to love him more than the business, to make leaving worth the sacrifice." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "It won't be easy, what he's trying to do. Be strong for him when it gets hard." The warning stayed with me on the drive home, mixing with Gianna's words about hope and light. Everyone seemed to understand that Flynn's attempt to leave was momentous, dangerous, maybe even impossible, and I was choosing to be part of it anyway. "They loved you," Flynn said as we pulled up outside my apartment. "Just like I knew they would." "They're wonderful," I agreed. "Normal, despite everything." "Most of us are," he said with a slight smile. "The business is what we do, not who we are." He walked me to my door, kissed me goodnight with a tenderness that made my knees weak, and left me standing in my doorway watching his taillights disappear. I was in love with Flynn Valente, and whatever that meant, whatever complications and dangers it brought, I was choosing it anyway. Choosing him, choosing us, choosing hope over fear, even if that choice would soon cost me more than I could have imagined. 3 months passed in what felt like both an eternity and an instant. Winter settled over the city with unusual severity, coating everything in ice and snow, but I barely noticed the cold. I was too wrapped up in Flynn, in the life we were building together despite the complications. He was making progress on his exit strategy, he told me, transitioning responsibilities to Marco, closing down certain operations, investing the family's money into legitimate businesses. It was slow, meticulous work, but he was committed to it, committed to me. We fell into rhythms that felt domestic, married. He had a key to my apartment now, often letting himself in with coffee and breakfast after I'd already left for school. His clothes occupied half my closet. His books were mixed with mine on the shelves. Toothbrush in my bathroom, his coffee mug in my kitchen. "Move in with me," he'd suggested more than once, but I'd resisted. My apartment was my sanctuary, the one space that remained entirely mine. I needed that independence, that proof that I hadn't been completely absorbed into his world. But I was spending more nights at his penthouse than my own place, waking up in his arms, sharing morning routines that felt achingly normal. He'd cook breakfast while I graded papers at his dining table. We'd read together in the evenings, his head in my lap while I played with his hair. We'd make love with an intensity that left me breathless, his hands and mouth learning every inch of me with devoted attention. It was during one of these ordinary evenings, both of us curled on his sofa reading different books, that my phone rang. The number was unknown, but something made me answer. "Sophia Reeves?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "Yes?" "This is Detective Sarah Williamson with the Organized Crime Task Force. I need to speak with you about your relationship with Flynn Valente." My blood went cold. Flynn looked up from his book, instantly alert to my distress. I mouthed police and watched his expression shudder. "I don't think I should speak with you without..." We just want to talk, the detective interrupted. Informally. Coffee tomorrow. I promise this isn't about getting you in trouble, Ms. Reeves. We're concerned for your safety. My safety is fine, I said firmly. Is it? You're dating a known organized crime figure. You're in his home right now, aren't you? We just want to make sure you understand the situation you're in. I understand perfectly, detective, and I have nothing to say to you. I ended the call, my hands shaking. Flynn set his book aside, pulling me against him. What did they want? To talk to me about you, about our relationship. I looked up at him. Should I be worried? No. They've been watching me since I got out, looking for evidence I'm still active in the organization. They probably think you're a way to get to me. His jaw tightened. I'm sorry, Sophia. I never wanted this attention on you. I can handle it, I said, more confidently than I felt. But the call had shaken me, made the danger he'd warned about feel suddenly concrete. I wasn't just dating Flynn. I was being watched by law enforcement, potentially put under surveillance, dragged into a world where my privacy and safety were compromised. The detective called twice more over the next week. I didn't answer. She showed up at my school once, waiting by my car after the final bell. I walked past her without speaking, Flynn's lawyer's number ready to dial if she pushed. They're trying to pressure you, Flynn explained when I told him. Make you nervous, make you think cooperating with them is the safest option. But they have nothing, Sophia. If they did, they'd arrest me, not harass my girlfriend. Girlfriend. The word should have thrilled me, but instead it felt like a target painted on my back. Maybe we should take a break, I suggested hesitantly. Just until things settle down. I don't want to be used against you. His expression darkened. Absolutely not. That's exactly what they want, to isolate me, to take away the one good thing in my life. Don't let them do that. But Flynn, no. He pulled me onto his lap, his arms caging me against him. You're mine, Sophia. I'm not letting you go just because things get difficult. We're in this together, remember? The possessiveness in his voice sent conflicting signals through me. Part of me thrilled at being claimed so absolutely. Part of me worried at how completely he assumed my compliance. I'm not yours like a possession, I said carefully. I'm with you because I choose to be. I know that. He softened immediately, his hand cupping my face. I'm sorry. This situation is making me tense. But you're right. You choose to be here, and I'm grateful for that choice every day. We made love that night with something desperate in it, as if we were both trying to prove something. Afterward, lying tangled in his sheets, I traced the scars I'd discovered on his body. Evidence of violence, of a life lived dangerously. Tell me about these, I asked, my fingers following a line along his ribs. Knife wound, bar fight when I was 22. He caught my hand, bringing it to his lips. Ancient history. And this one? A circular mark on his shoulder. Bullet graze. Also, ancient history. Flynn. What do you want me to say, Sophia? That my life has been dangerous? You already know that I've been hurt and have hurt others. You know that too. He rolled to face me fully. But that's not who I am anymore. Not who I want to be with you. I know, I whispered. Sometimes I wonder if you can really leave it all behind. If we can really have the life you talk about. We can. His certainty was absolute. We will. I promise you. I wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. Because the alternative, that I'd fallen in love with a man who couldn't escape his past, was too painful to consider. Spring arrived suddenly, the way it does in the Northeast. One day everything was gray and frozen. The next, crocuses were pushing through the snow. With the change in seasons came change in other ways, Flynn told me he'd made his final meeting with Marco official. It's done. He's taking over leadership effective next month. I'm out. Really? Hope surged in my chest. Completely out. Completely. I'll still own legitimate businesses, still have money invested, but the organized crime operations? Marco's problem now. He pulled me into his arms, which means we can start planning our future for real. The farmhouse, a wedding, all of it. A wedding. My heart stuttered at the casual way he said it, as if our marriage was inevitable, decided. Flynn, you haven't actually asked me to marry you, haven't I? He smiled, reaching into his pocket. Then I should rectify that. He dropped to one knee right there in his kitchen, opening a velvet box to reveal a ring that took my breath away. A simple solitaire diamond, elegant and perfect. Sophia Reeves, will you marry me? Will you build that life on the farmhouse land with me? Have babies and grow old together? Let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of your love? Tears blurred my vision. This was happening. He was really leaving his old life, really offering me everything I'd dreamed of. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto my finger, then stood, lifting me and spinning me around. His kiss was fierce, claiming, full of promise. We were going to make it. Against all odds, we were going to have our happy ending. I was so happy, so relieved, that I didn't notice the warning signs. The way Flynn still took calls in Italian that he'd step out of the room for. The way Gianna looked worried when I showed her the ring. The way Uncle Sal said, "Congratulations," with something that sounded like sympathy. I didn't notice because I didn't want to notice. I wanted the fairy tale Flynn was offering, and I was about to learn the hardest lesson of my life. That fairy tales don't exist in the real world, and happy endings have to be fought for, bled for, sometimes died for. The first crack appeared 2 weeks after our engagement, during dinner with Gianna and her husband. Flynn's phone rang. He glanced at it, his expression closing off in a way I'd learned to recognize. I need to take this. He stepped onto Gianna's back porch, but his raised voice carried through the glass door. I couldn't make out words, but the anger was clear. Is everything okay? I asked Gianna, watching Flynn pace. She and her husband exchanged a look. Marco is having trouble with the transition, she said carefully. Some of the older members of the organization don't want to accept new leadership. But Flynn said he was out, I protested. He is, Gianna assured me. But these things, they're complicated. Flynn might be out, but his legacy, his decisions, they have consequences that don't just disappear overnight. Flynn returned, his jaw tight. We need to go. What's wrong? I asked as he helped me into my coat. Nothing for you to worry about. Just some business I need to handle. Flynn, you said you were out. I am out. His tone brooked no argument. This is just cleanup, final details. But over the next weeks, there were more calls, more tense conversations, more nights when Flynn came to bed late, his body rigid with stress. Talk to me, I pleaded one night. Tell me what's happening. Marco is struggling to maintain control. There's been friction, but it's temporary. It'll settle down. What kind of friction? The kind that's my problem to fix since I'm the one who created this situation by stepping down. He pulled me against him. Don't worry, sweetheart. It doesn't affect us. But it did affect us. I could feel it in the way Flynn held me tighter at night, in the increased security presence around both of us, in the worry lines that had reappeared around his eyes. And then, one April afternoon, everything shattered. I was leaving school, heading to my car with a stack of papers to grade, when a van pulled up beside me. The door slid open, and hands grabbed me, pulling me inside before I could even scream. A cloth pressed over my mouth and nose, chemical smell, and the world went dark. I woke to darkness and the smell of mildew. My head pounded, and my mouth was dry. When I tried to move, I discovered my hands were bound behind my back, ankles tied to the legs of a chair. Panic surged through me, and I fought against the restraints before forcing myself to breathe, to think. She's awake. A man's voice, unfamiliar, nearby. Light suddenly flooded the space, and I blinked against it. I was in what looked like a warehouse, empty except for the chair I was tied to, and several men standing around me. They were dressed casually, but had an air of violence about them that made my blood run cold. Ms. Reeves. One of them stepped forward, older than the others, with gray hair and cold eyes. So nice of you to join us. I'm Vincent Rossini. The name meant nothing to me, but I tried to keep my voice steady. What do you want? Why have you taken me? What I want is for Flynn Valenti to remember his obligations. What I want is for him to stop pretending he can just walk away from the life. Vincent smiled, and it was like watching a snake bare its teeth. You see, Flynn's little retirement plan has caused problems. Marco isn't strong enough to hold the territory, and other families are moving in. Flynn needs to come back, take control again. And you, my dear, are going to convince him to do exactly that. You're insane, I said. Flynn won't come back because you've kidnapped me. He'll go to the police. Vincent laughed. Flynn Valenti go to the police? Oh, that's rich. No, sweetheart. Flynn will come and he'll make a deal. His return to leadership in exchange for your safe return. It's simple mathematics. You don't know him. He's done with this life. For you? Maybe. But will he still be done when he gets pictures of you bleeding? When he hears recordings of you begging for mercy? Vincent leaned closer. Flynn knows how this works. He knows what we're capable of, and he knows the only way to stop it is to give us what we want. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. This couldn't be happening. We'd been so close to our new life, to freedom. And now, because of me, Flynn would be dragged back into the violence he'd been trying to escape. Let her go. Flynn's voice cut through the warehouse, and my eyes snapped open. He stood at the entrance, flanked by Marco and several other men I vaguely recognized from family gatherings. He wore all black, and there was something in his expression I'd never seen before. Not the gentle man who held me while I slept, but something colder, more dangerous. The man he'd been before I knew him. Flynn Valenti. Vincent straightened, a smile spreading across his face. So good of you to join us, though I expected you to come alone. I'm not that stupid, Vincent. Flynn's eyes found mine, and I saw the fear beneath the ice. Let her go. Now. I'll let her go when you agree to resume leadership. Marco can serve under you, but you need to be in charge. The families need stability, and only you can provide it. No deal. Flynn stepped forward. You let her go first, then we'll talk. Not how this works, Vincent began, but Flynn interrupted. It's exactly how this works. You harm her in any way, and I rain hell down on you and everyone you love. You know I can do it, Vincent. You know I have the resources and the connections. Let her go. The two men stared at each other. A battle of wills playing out in that warehouse. Finally, Vincent nodded to one of his men, who moved behind me and cut my bonds. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't support me. Flynn was there in an instant, catching me, his arms wrapping around me with fierce protectiveness. Are you hurt? He demanded, his hands running over me, checking for injuries. No, I'm okay, I managed, clinging to him. Get her out of here, Flynn told Marco, trying to pass me off. No. I held on to Flynn tighter. I'm not leaving you. Sophia, you need to go. Now. How touching. Vincent interrupted. "But we still have business to discuss. Here's my counteroffer," Flynn said, his voice dropping to something lethal. "I pay you $5 million to forget this ever happened and to leave me and mine completely alone. You take the money, disappear for a while, and when you come back, I won't remember this incident." Marco continues as head of the family with my support from the outside. $5 million? Vincent scoffed. "You think you can buy your way out after the chaos you've caused? 10 million then. My final offer." Flynn's arms tightened around me. "But if you refuse, if you continue to threaten what's mine, I'll use every resource I have left to destroy you. Your businesses, your connections, your family's reputation, everything. I'll leave the organization, but not before I burn your world to the ground." The warehouse fell silent. I could feel the tension, feel how close we were to violence. Finally, Vincent nodded slowly. 10 million. But you keep your word about Marco having your support. Done. Transfer will happen within the hour. Flynn looked at Marco. "Get Sophia to a doctor. Make sure she's really okay." "Flynn," I started, but he cut me off. "Go, please. I need to know you're safe." Marco gently pried me from Flynn's arms, and I let him lead me out of the warehouse because staying was only making things harder for Flynn. But I looked back, watching Flynn face Vincent and the other men, and I understood something I should have understood weeks ago. Flynn hadn't really left, couldn't really leave, because even in trying to walk away, he was still powerful enough that his actions affected everyone, still connected enough that his enemies could find his weak points, and I was his weakest point. Marco drove me to a private clinic where a doctor examined me, pronounced me physically unharmed, and gave me something for the residual effects of whatever chemical they'd used to knock me out. Then he drove me to Flynn's penthouse and stationed himself and 3 other men outside the door. "I'm staying until Flynn gets back," Marco said. "He'd kill me if anything happened to you." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. I showered, trying to scrub away the feel of those men's hands on me, then curled up in Flynn's bed wearing his shirt, waiting. He came home near midnight. I heard the door, heard him speaking quietly with Marco, then his footsteps approaching the bedroom. He looked drained, older than I'd ever seen him. He sank onto the edge of the bed beside me, and I saw his hands were shaking. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "God, Sophia, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I should have protected you better, should have seen this coming." "Shh." I pulled him down beside me and he buried his face in my neck. I felt something wet against my skin and realized he was crying. "I could have lost you," he whispered. "When I got that call, when they told me they had you, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just knew I had to get you back no matter what it cost." "You got me back," I said, holding him tight. "I'm here. I'm safe. But for how long? How long until the next Vincent decides to use you against me? How long until my past destroys what we're trying to build?" I didn't have an answer for that. We lay there in the darkness, holding each other, and I felt something shift between us. Not breaking exactly, but bending under weight it wasn't meant to carry. "I can't do this," I said finally. Flynn went rigid in my arms. "What?" "I can't be your weakness. Can't be the reason you get pulled back into this life. Can't be the weapon people use against you." Tears slid down my cheeks. Today proved that as long as we're together, you can't really leave. You'll always be Flynn Valente, and people will always try to use me to control you. "No." He sat up, turning to face me. "Don't do this. We can work this out. I'll hire more security. We'll be more careful. It's not about being more careful. It's about the reality of who you are." I touched his face, memorizing the feel of him. "I love you, Flynn. I think I always will. But loving you means accepting that we can't have the life we want. Not while people know I matter to you. Then I'll make sure no one knows, he said desperately. We'll keep our relationship private. I'll increase security on you. That's not a life, Flynn. That's a prison. And I won't live in fear, always looking over my shoulder, always wondering if today is the day someone comes for me to get to you. So what are you saying? His voice broke. You're leaving me? I'm saying we need to take a real break, not just distance, but actual separation. You finish your transition out, establish yourself as truly separate from the organization, prove that threatening me won't bring you back. And if that works, if you're really free, then maybe we can try again. How long? I don't know. A year? Maybe more? I forced the words out past the pain in my chest. Long enough that people forget I'm important to you. That will never happen. He grabbed my hand, pressing it to his chest. You're more important than anything. I'd give it all up, Sophia. The money, the power, the connections. I'd walk away from everything if you asked me to. Would you? I asked gently. Or would you just be looking over your shoulder your whole life, waiting for the next threat? Would you really be free? Or just hiding? He had no answer for that. We spent the rest of the night tangled together, making love with something desperate and final in it. Memorizing each other's bodies, storing up memories for the separation ahead. In the morning, I packed my things from his apartment. Flynn watched silently, his expression carved from stone. I'll wait for you, he said at the door. However long it takes, I'll wait. Don't, I whispered. Don't put your life on hold for me. If you meet someone else, someone safer, someone who doesn't come with all these complications, let yourself be happy. There is no one else. There will never be anyone else. He pulled me close one last time. You're it for me, Sophia. The beginning and end of everything. I kissed him, tasting salt from both our tears, then walked out before I could change my mind. The next months were the hardest of my life. I threw myself into teaching, took on extra responsibilities, stayed busy enough that I didn't have time to think about what I'd lost. But at night, alone in my bed, I'd pull out his letters, read them over and over, and cry myself to sleep. Flynn honored my request for separation. No calls, no texts, no flowers. Just silence that felt like a physical ache. I heard through Gianna, who refused to let our friendship die with my relationship with her brother, that he'd successfully completed the transition. Marco was firmly in charge, and Flynn had sold off the last of his connections to the organization. He bought the farmhouse, Gianna told me over coffee 6 months after I'd left, moved out there, started renovating it. He's living the life you two planned, just without you. The information hurt, but also gave me hope. He was doing it, making the changes we'd talked about, building the life he'd promised. How is he? I couldn't help asking. Gianna's expression was gentle. He's surviving, working from sunrise to sunset on the house and land, keeping busy. But Sophia, he's not living. He's just existing until you come back. If I come back, I corrected. When? Gianna said firmly. Because you love him, and he loves you. And love like that doesn't just disappear. She was right. The love hadn't disappeared. If anything, it had grown stronger in the absence, refined by separation into something pure and undeniable. A year after I'd left, I got a letter. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter, addressed in Flynn's familiar script. Sophia, I've honored your request for space, but it's been a year, and I need to say some things. I need you to know what's been happening in case you still care. Marco is strong as head of the family now. Respected, feared when necessary, but also fair. He's doing well, and he's made it clear that I'm out. Not advising, not consulting, truly out. I finished renovating the farmhouse. It's exactly what we imagined, with the garden and the rooms we talked about. Sometimes I walk through it and see ghosts of us, of the life we should have had. I'm not writing to pressure you or to ask you to come back before you're ready. I'm writing because I made you a promise once, and I intend to keep it. I promised to prove I could be the man you deserve, and I think I've done that. I've left the life, built something legitimate and real. But I also need you to know, I'm still waiting. I will always be waiting. Because you're not just someone I loved once, Sophia. You're the only person I'll ever love. The only future I want. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. At the farmhouse, building the life we planned, hoping you'll come home to me. Forever yours, Flynn. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. He'd done it. Everything he'd promised, he'd actually done. And I'd asked him to wait. The next morning, I called in sick to school for the first time all year. Then I got in my car and drove north, following half-remembered directions to that white clapboard farmhouse. When I pulled up the gravel drive, I saw it had been transformed. The porch was rebuilt, painted crisp white with hanging baskets of flowers. The fields were clearly being cultivated, neat rows of early spring planting visible. Smoke curled from the chimney, and in the yard, I saw a garden taking shape. Before I could even get out of the car, the front door opened. Flynn stood there, looking startled, disbelieving. He was dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt, his hair longer than I remembered, his face weathered from outdoor work. We stared at each other across the distance. Then I was running, and he was running, and we met halfway in a collision of bodies and tears and desperate kisses. You came. He breathed against my lips. You actually came. You waited, I said, crying and laughing at the same time. You really did it. Everything you promised. I'd do anything for you. His arms tightened around me. I'd wait forever if that's what it took. We stood there in his yard, holding each other like we'd never let go, and I felt something settle in my chest that had been restless for a year. This was home. Not the farmhouse, not the city. Flynn. He was my home. Marry me, I said. Right now. Today. I don't want to waste any more time. He pulled back enough to look at me, his eyes searching mine. Are you sure? We can wait. Do it properly. I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed me again, deeper this time, claiming. When we finally broke apart, he was smiling that devastating smile I'd fallen in love with through letters written in prison. The ring is inside, he said, on my nightstand. I've looked at it every night for a year, imagining this moment. We went inside together, into the farmhouse he'd restored with his own hands, the life he'd built while waiting for me to come home. And 3 days later, standing in that same yard under a spring sky with Gianna and Pastor Michael as witnesses, we got married. Simple vows, simple ceremony, but more meaningful than any elaborate wedding could have been. Because we'd fought for this, had given up everything for it. Had proved that love could survive separation, could transcend violence, could build something beautiful from broken pieces. I love you, Flynn said as he slid the ring onto my finger. For all the years we lost and all the years ahead. I love you, I replied, meaning it with every cell in my body. Forever. And as he kissed me, as our family and friends cheered, as the spring sun broke through clouds to warm our faces, I knew we'd finally made it. The fairy tale didn't exist in the real world, but we'd built something better, something real, earned, permanent. A love that had survived everything life threw at it and emerged stronger on the other side. And in the farmhouse over the next years, we built the life Flynn had envisioned in those prison letters. Children's laughter filled the rooms. Gardens flourished under our care. Peace settled like soft snow, gentle and complete. The man who'd been a crime boss became a farmer, a husband, a father. The woman who'd written letters to an inmate became a wife who'd never doubted, never given up, always believed in redemption. And on quiet evenings, we'd sit on that wraparound porch, our children playing in the yard, and read aloud from those original letters, remembering where we'd started, celebrating where we'd ended up. Two people from impossible worlds who'd built a bridge between them, and crossed it together into the life we'd both been dreaming of all along.